Welcome to the Next Thought podcast, where we unpack curated insights from the world's most impactful thinkers, books, and mental models, all in under 20 minutes. And for this deep dive, we're plunging into a really intriguing concept known as lifestyle design. It's drawn from a fascinating book that will really challenge conventional wisdom about work and retirement. Our mission today, explore how some people are radically redefining success, time, and freedom, and what that can mean for you.
Indeed, this deep dive really pushes against a lot of our ingrained assumptions, doesn't it? About how life and work have to be structured.
Absolutely.
We're looking at material that proposes a genuinely counterintuitive approach. Like, what if the rewards of a life of hard work didn't require waiting until the very end? What if you could experience those freedoms, those adventures now, not just banking on some often elusive retirement?
Right. So not just someday, but now.
Exactly. We'll unpack a framework for creating an ideal lifestyle, like the book says, not just someday, but in the here and now.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The author's own journey, which is detailed in the book, it really sets the stage for this new way of thinking.
It's quite the story.
It really is.
Yeah.
They went from working these grueling 14-hour days, making maybe $40,000 a year,
Yeah.
to, incredibly, a 4-hour work week and earning over $140,000 a month.
That's a staggering shift.
It is. It's the kind of transformation that makes you stop and just ask, how? I mean, really, how?
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more remarkable, this whole concept, this book, it was initially turned down by 26 out of 27 publishers.
Wow, 26.
Yeah. One even told the author it wouldn't be a mainstream success. But then, boom, it hits the New York Times bestseller list just 5 days after launch.
Which just shows you.
It clearly shows how many people were, and I think still are, just desperate for alternatives.
Definitely. And what's fascinating here is how the book draws this distinction between what it calls the new rich, or NR,
Okay.
and those who follow a more traditional deferred life plan, saving everything up for some distant retirement.
The standard path.
Right. The book argues that people often don't really want millions of dollars sitting in a bank. What they actually want are the experiences they believe only millions can buy.
Like what sort of experiences?
Oh, spontaneous ski trips, exotic travel, maybe just complete freedom to structure their day however they want.
Ah, okay. The lifestyle itself.
Exactly. So the core question then becomes, how can you achieve that millionaire lifestyle without first needing the millions?
That's where it gets really interesting for me, because it sounds like these new rich, they separate themselves by just fundamentally redefining their goals, their priorities.
Completely different mindset.
Like instead of the usual goal of working for yourself, the NR aim is to have others work for them. Is that right?
That's a key part of it, yes. And while many of us think about retiring early or young,
Which sounds great.
it does, but the NR focus instead on distributing recovery periods and adventures, what the book calls mini retirements throughout their entire lives.
Mini retirements. I like the sound of that. It's like a total inversion of the traditional work till you drop then retire model.
Precisely. And these different priorities, they extend really deeply into how success itself is defined.
How so?
Well, a traditional mindset might mean striving to be the boss, right? Being involved in every little detail.
Yeah, the person in charge.
But the NR, they aim to be the owner, owning the trains, as the book puts it, and having someone else make sure they run on time.
Okay, so less hands-on management, more system building.
Exactly. It's not just about making a ton of money either. It's about making money, yes, but with specific reasons and defined dreams behind it.
Defined dreams?
Yeah, with timelines, with actual steps included. The focus shifts quite profoundly from just having more stuff to having more quality and less clutter.
Less clutter.
Recognizing that, wanting more material things can often just be a justification for wasting time and energy, time that could be spent on actual experiences.
So what does this all mean for someone listening right now, thinking about their own life? One of the most provocative ideas in the book is this concept of the freedom multiplier.
Ah, yes, the freedom multiplier.
The book puts forward this idea. It's quite challenging. Someone working, say, 80 hours a week for $500,000 a year.
Sounds pretty good on paper.
Right. But they might actually be less powerful, have fewer real options than someone working maybe a quarter of those hours for $40,000.
Okay.
But with complete freedom over their when, where, and how they live and work.
So that $40,000 because it's detached from time and location.
Exactly. It can effectively be worth, the book claims, 3 to 10 times as much It's all about options, the ability to choose. That's presented as the real power.
Mm.
Now, for someone earning significantly more, maybe that $500,000, what do you think is the biggest mental block to accepting that $40,000 with freedom could actually be more powerful?
That's a really critical question. I think the mental block often stems from just these deeply ingrained societal norms, you know? We equate income directly with status and power.
Sure, that makes sense.
We're sort of taught that more money automatically means more freedom, but this book really challenges that direct link.
It decouples them.
It does. It argues that true power isn't just the raw dollar amount. It's about the leverage those dollars give you in terms of time and location independence.
Leverage, okay.
And this leads to a really powerful question the book poses again and again. What if I did the opposite?
Challenge everything.
Right. It encourages us, you listening included, to question these common sense rules, which the book describes as often just being socially reinforced illusions.
Socially reinforced illusions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And the author's own story kind of illustrates this rebellious streak. You know, getting fired from an ice cream parlor at 14 because he finished his work too quickly.
Too efficient.
Right. Or intentionally finding a way into Princeton despite low SAT scores because he apparently concluded, I'm just not good at reality.
So finding the hacks, the loopholes.
It's about finding and seizing options that others just don't see, often because they're trapped by that conventional thinking.
Okay, so the path to becoming part of this new rich is laid out in this acronym, DEAL. D-E-A-L.
That's the framework.
Let's start with D-definition. It's about turning that misguided common sense upside down. Right. What's the core redefinition needed here?
Well, the core redefinition is really rooted in this belief that reality is negotiable.
Reality is negotiable.
Yeah. The book argues that the real fantasy isn't the $1 million in the bank. The fantasy is the lifestyle of complete freedom it supposedly allows.
Got it.
And it details how the author personally separated his income from his time, which let him travel the world, create this ideal lifestyle, you know, without waiting decades.
So it's not about saving for that distant retirement or finding that one elusive dream job.
No, it's about achieving fun and profit, as he puts it, simultaneously, by freeing your time and automating your income now.
Okay, next is E-elimination. This sounds like it goes beyond just time management.
Oh yeah, it challenges the very notion.
The goal here seems to be boosting personal productivity massively, like 100 to 500%, by ruthlessly cutting out the unimportant stuff.
Ruthlessly is the key word.
And the core message is less is not laziness. Doing less meaningless work frees you up for things that actually matter to you. What are the practical principles behind this?
So the book really leans on two foundational concepts here. First, the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle.
Right, 20% effort, 80% results.
Exactly. And second, Parkinson's law, which basically states that work expands to fill the time available for its completion.
Oh, I know that one well. Give something a week, it takes a week.
Precisely. And the book shares this great story about a reader, Charney. He started asking himself just 3 times a day, am I being productive or just active?
Productive versus active.
Just a simple question. And by focusing, he managed to cut his work week from 40 hours down to 18.
Less than half.
And get this, he produced 4 times the results.
Wow. It shows that so much of our busyness is just activity, right? Not actual productive output. That's a strong stance, though, especially this idea of a low-information diet. How does someone practically implement that without feeling totally cut off?
Right.
Or like they're missing critical info?
Yeah, it sounds radical.
I mean, the author claims to never watch the news, only bought 1 newspaper in 5 years. It's about cultivating selective ignorance, apparently, because what information consumes is attention.
Precisely. It's about being incredibly intentional about filtering your input. You choose what gets your attention.
Okay.
And this idea, it extends beyond just news or reading. It's also about minimizing interruptions in your day.
Like emails, calls.
Exactly. The book actually gives specific templates for things like email autoresponders and voicemail greetings. They're designed to deflect non-urgent contact and train people to be more concise.
Train people? How?
Well, like a voicemail might say, I check messages twice daily at 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. Eastern. If it's truly urgent, contact my cell. Things like that.
Setting clear boundaries.
Right. The goal is to avoid all that unproductive chit-chat, get straight to the point, and basically create a system where you are not constantly on call. You protect your focused attention.
Which is your most valuable resource, arguably. Okay, moving on to A, automation. This is about putting cash flow on autopilot.
The holy grail for many.
And the book suggests a surprising first step, using virtual assistants, or VAs, even if you don't think you need one.
Yeah, that throws people sometimes.
Why? The book says it's an exercise in commanding instead of being commanded. What's the principle there? It's interesting, that small mindset shift about delegation.
The principle is really about learning to leverage other people's time effectively. It's a low-cost, low-risk way to learn remote management, to learn delegation.
How low cost are we talking?
Well, the book suggests a 2 to 4 week test could cost as little as $100 to $400. So you get immense learning for a pretty small outlay. And the key insight isn't that you can always do something more cheaply yourself. You probably can. The point is freeing your time for, bigger and better things.
Higher leverage stuff.
Exactly. Even if a VA costs more per hour than you technically earn, trading that time to free up, say, a full 8-hour day each week, that could be incredibly valuable for focusing on strategic growth or personal goals.
Makes sense. Automation also involves creating what the book calls a muse, which is basically an automated business, right? Minimal direct involvement needed.
That's the idea, a business that generates income more passively.
The book gives examples, like Doug, who created an online sound effects library. Works less than 2 hours a week, pulls in over $10,000 a month sometimes.
Yeah, with almost no financial risk. Or the photographer example.
Right. She stopped shooting weddings herself, outsourced the actual photography, and now just sells the digital files, making more money with way less cost and time. How does someone even start creating a muse like that? Seems daunting.
Well, the book actually provides a pretty practical blueprint. It even details how you can position yourself as a top expert in a narrow field surprisingly quickly, like under 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
By strategically acquiring what it calls credibility indicators. Things like joining trade organizations, maybe summarizing the top books in that niche, giving free seminars, connecting with journalists.
Building perceived authority quickly.
Right. The core idea is finding a knowledge gap in a specific niche and positioning yourself as the go-to accessible solution. Even if your expertise is, let's say, rapidly accelerated initially, it's strategic positioning, not deception.
Building value, targeted value. Okay.
Exactly.
Finally, we get to L Liberation, the mobile manifesto. This is about freedom of location, taking those mini retirements throughout life.
Bringing it all together.
Now, many of us feel stuck in the 9-to-5 grind.
Yeah.
But the book outlines practical steps for employees, too, on how to negotiate remote work.
Yes, it's not just for entrepreneurs.
It mentions Sherwood, a mechanical engineer. He managed to get 4 remote days a week approved. How did you pull that off?
His approach was all about creating irrefutable leverage. He didn't just ask nicely.
We built a case.
He proved he could produce twice as many designs in half the time when working remotely. He made it, as the book says, too expensive or excruciating to refuse his request.
Wow. Quantifiable results.
Absolutely. The book also talks about the hourglass approach, maybe taking a longer initial remote period as a trial, a proof of concept, then gradually scaling back your required office time.
Clever. And that enables those distributed mini retirements we talked about.
That's the ultimate goal for liberation, yes.
This whole concept of mini retirements is just so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Instead of hoarding all your fun for some distant future.
That might never come.
Right. It suggests alternating these periods of maybe high-intensity work with extended periods of rest and adventure now.
Throughout your life.
And the author gives personal examples like living like a king on very little. Buenos Aires for about $1,500 a month, including airfare from JFK.
Yeah, or Berlin for even less, around $1,180 a month, also including flights.
And these costs were way less than his normal expenses back in the U.S.
Yeah.
How is that even possible for most people? And what about all the usual fears, kids, safety, insurance?
Well, the low costs often come down to geographic arbitrage. Your money just goes way further depending on where you spend it.
Buying power multiplies.
Exactly. And the book tackles those common fears head on. Concerns about kids, safety, health insurance. It offers practical solutions and real-world examples.
Like who?
Like single mothers, families with kids who've successfully traveled the world, often finding it less dangerous than their hometowns, surprisingly.
Interesting.
The core insight here is that often our fears are really just well-disguised excuses for inaction. They're products of conventional thinking, not usually insurmountable obstacles.
Excuses for inaction. Okay, so the author's own journey involved learning lessons, making mistakes. The book shares crucial ones to avoid.
Definitely.
Things like Work for work's sake, micromanaging, chasing bad customers, constantly checking email. We've touched on some of that.
All time and energy sinks.
But one concept shared really hit me. The cheesecake factor.
Yeah.
Can you explain that one? It sounds odd.
Yeah, the cheesecake factor.
Yeah.
It's actually a really profound concept about how people self-impose suffering.
Self-imposed suffering.
Yeah. The author tells the story about making a truly terrible, inedible cheesecake, but he forced himself to eat it anyway as a kind of punishment.
Okay. Weird, but I see the analogy coming.
Right. It's an analogy for staying in a bad job or a bad situation, maybe out of fear or obligation, even when you know it's not right for you and won't fulfill you.
You force yourself to eat the bad cheesecake.
Exactly. And the book stresses there are two kinds of mistakes. Mistakes of ambition, those come from actually acting, maybe with incomplete information.
Taking a risk.
Right. And then mistakes of sloth, those stem from refusing to change, usually out of fear. The book strongly encourages the first type.
Mistakes of ambition over mistakes of sloth.
Yes, because the discomfort of taking a leap, trying something new, is often far less damaging in the long run than the slow decay of just staying stuck. It suggests our biggest prisons are often built from inaction, not from trying and failing.
That's powerful. It reminds me of those quotes in the book. Adversity doesn't build character. It reveals it.
Mm-hmm. And similarly, money doesn't change you. It reveals who you are.
Yeah. And the examples of others who've actually done this stuff, they're really inspiring. The musician finding creative freedom, the lawyer building a virtual practice from Colombia,
The photographer automating her business so she could go ski in the Alps.
even a Subway franchisee cutting his work week from 7 days down to 4, getting complete control over his schedule. It really makes you think, if they can do it.
What's stopping you, right?
Yeah.
And I think the core message from all these stories, from this whole deep dive, really, is that reality is negotiable.
Negotiable, not fixed.
Right. The world runs largely on social conventions, shared beliefs, not immutable physical laws. And once you truly grasp that, you can start to proactively design your life instead of just letting circumstances dictate it.
Design it, not just react to it.
Exactly. And the goal isn't just about eliminating the bad stuff, the suffering. It's about actively pursuing and experiencing the best the world has to offer, but on your terms.
So if you've been listening to this, maybe the question to ask yourself is, what's your cheesecake? What self-imposed suffering are you maybe enduring that could be avoided just by questioning those socially reinforced delusions? This deep dive into lifestyle design, it really reveals that the freedom we often dream about for retirement, it can absolutely be accessed now.
It's possible.
It's about making specific choices, leveraging these new tools and ways of thinking, and just courageously challenging those deep-seated assumptions we all carry.
And remember, the most important actions, the ones that lead to real change, they often feel uncomfortable, usually because they challenge that status quo.
Right, growth is uncomfortable.
But as you've heard today, the cost of inaction, just allowing circumstance to impose itself on you for years, maybe even decades, that's often the greatest risk of all. So what are you waiting for?
Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this exploration has given you some surprising insights and maybe sparked some new ways of thinking about your own possibilities. Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Thought podcast.